Stephen King has a it's probably one of the top 10 pieces of writing advice that you'll hear, and it's kill your darlings. And I think he means it in a very specific way, but I think that we should be hesitant just to take that single piece of advice and run with it. Usually it's the case that writing advice comes in a context, and I don't like this bumper sticker advice that is out there. We need to understand it more broadly, and if we don't understand it more broadly, I do not think that we should take this advice of killing our darlings. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. Kill your darlings. This is a piece of writing advice that is heard a lot. And it's a piece of writing advice that's heard a lot because Stephen King is he's in the top 100 writers probably of all time. He's in the top 100 writers currently living, and he might be in the top 10 writers living right now. I'm sure he is. So it's a piece of writing advice that's often heard because Stephen King is so prominent. And I'm not here to bash Stephen King, okay? I'm not here to bash Stephen King at all because he has the ability to write, because I've read his stuff and I do have issues with how he writes in specific ways, but people like his stuff. And if he has an audience and people want to read his stuff, I'm not going to say that he is an awful writer. First of all, because he isn't. Second of all, because his audience likes what he's writing, therefore they are going to buy his stuff and read his stuff. But this is a quote, kill your darlings. It is a quote from Stephen King's book. I believe it's called On Writing. And to a certain degree, I understand why he gives this advice. Actually, I do understand why he gives this advice in general. He believes that writers should become more detached from their writing. He believes that writers should not get too attached to something that is going to make their writing or book worse, if that makes sense. And I think that he is a person who gets attached to what he writes, because I don't think that he would have this piece of writing advice if he didn't. What he would have instead, if he was more detached from his writing, is kill those things that make your book bad. Okay? He actually uses a specific type of word. He uses a word that evokes emotion. He uses this word of darlings. He uses those things that are closest to our hearts. That is what a darling is. It's those things that we love. You might call your children your darlings. I think that in older British fiction and older British writing, people actually did refer to their children as their darlings. These are these things that are closest to your heart. So what he is saying is you need to be giving up, or you need to be willing to give up those things that you love the most. That could be a character, that could be a chapter, it could be a plot point, it could be a specific thing that the character says. So I get that advice when you put it in a broader context. But I think that it takes too much of a one-sided view of writing. Okay? And here's where the question of today comes. Should you kill your darlings? Or let's say it in another way. Should you kill those things about your writing that you love the most? Should you do that? Should we do that as writers? Now, I had an episode earlier, and I can't remember what this one is called at all. I talked about cutting parts of your writing out. I talked about how there's this, I don't like this piece of writing advice at all. I think it's terrible writing advice, okay? I don't usually say writing advice is terrible, but this writing advice, I think, is terrible. There is a viewpoint on killing your darlings that is actually good, but this piece of writing advice that people have given, that I'm about to say, I just think it's bad advice, and I'll explain why again. So people say that if you aren't sure about the beginning or the ending of your book, or especially the beginning, cut out a chunk. Just cut out a chunk of your book and then see how it reads. It'll be better without that first part that you're writing. So you cut out a chunk until you hit action or something like that. And this doesn't make sense to me because it seems completely arbitrary. And writing takes a lot of care. And writing takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time, and you need to go over your writing again and again and again. So I'm not in favor of doing something blindly. I am in favor of cutting a chunk out, seeing how it works. If it doesn't work, stick it back in. If that doesn't work, rewrite it. If that doesn't work, rewrite the whole entire chapter. If that doesn't work, rethink the beginning of the book, etc. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's a very complex thing you're trying to do. But I'm not in favor of doing something that is so arbitrary. I'm not in favor of just cutting out a chunk of your book just because you aren't sure what to do about it. So if you have a beginning of your book and you think, man, I just don't like this beginning, I don't know, it's not working out, what you should not do is just cut out a chunk, right? What you should do is you should read through it, and if you find a spot that makes more sense to begin, cut out the stuff before it, but you're doing it in a way that makes sense. You're doing it in a way that you're thinking through what you're writing. And I think that we can write well and learn to write well without basing things on luck. And that is why I am not in favor of things that are done blindly. So with this idea of just cutting something out in mind, should we take this single phrase of killing your darlings? Should we kill our darlings? The answer might be annoying, but the answer is that it depends. It really depends on the writing. If you love something in the book, if you're like, man, I like this scene, but it just doesn't work, or if it is just bad, if you're like, man, I love this thing, but it's just something that just doesn't work, it's just something that doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense within the book, then sure, cut it out. Get rid of it, rip it out of the book, smooth down those edges, because you probably had it connecting to a lot of different things. So you need to tear that out of the book, and you need to make sure the book fits together in a way where you don't have a gaping hole because of what you tore out. You can do it, and I think you should get rid of bad aspects of your book. Now, just a quick caveat, everybody's going to make mistakes in their books. Okay, everybody. The best writer is going to make mistakes. The worst writer is going to make mistakes. There's always going to be mistakes. And I'm going to be able to find those mistakes if I really want to. So be aware that you're always going to make mistakes. Be aware that you're always going to put something out that isn't perfect. But if you find a bad aspect of your book and you can do anything about it, yeah, kill that. If you love it, even if you love it, get rid of it. Because if you leave it in, your book is going to be worse. And this is why I always talk about being your worst critic, being hypercritical when you get to the editing/finishing stage. But what if that aspect is actually good? What if that thing you love about the book is great? It's awesome. And you don't want to get rid of it at all. What if it is something that makes the book a better book? There is absolutely no reason to cut it out. So you do not need to kill all of your darlings. Maybe this advice should be rephrased to be willing to kill some of your darlings. Be willing to get rid of your darlings because it might be the case that those are making your book worse. But again, Stephen King does touch upon something very important with this piece of advice. Don't be so attached to your writing. Do not be so emotionally attached to your writing that you can't get rid of something, that you cut off your nose to spite your face, as it were, right? You're doing something that is bad for your writing. You're making your writing worse because you love that, because you like something tiny within your book. Or it might even be a whole entire chapter. It might be the whole entire book, to be honest. You might need to rework the entire book. And there are times when I think that is warranted. In general, I would say just finish the book and move on and go on to another book. But I think that's what he's trying to convey. And I think that's a very important piece of advice. And I think that here's the thing. With writing, you will come across one sentence pieces of writing advice. The writing advice is expressed in one sentence, but in reality, it probably takes about a chapter to explain what that writing advice means. Okay? So writing is a complex thing, and I've said this already. And the writing advice you should be getting should be complex. So don't base you're writing off of a single piece of writing advice. Don't just base it off of a collection of writing advice. Actually understand what that person is trying to convey. I think that at the heart of what Stephen King is trying to convey is good, but I think that how it comes across to people, kill your darlings, yes and no. In some cases you do it, in some cases you don't. So what do you think about that? Do you think that there are ever any cases where you should kill your darlings? Do you think that you should pretty much be brutal? You should just get rid of them as much as you can? Or do you think that I'm completely off and misunderstood Stephen King completely? You can definitely tell me down below. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support me, there's really one simple thing you can do. You can go to danielpoppie.com/newsletter and sign up for my newsletter. And when you sign up, you'll actually be able to get access to my publication roadmap. So that's everything I have planned for pretty much every project I have into the next decade. Again, that is danielpoppie.com/newsletter. You can also find the link below.